Hi, everybody. Welcome to Native Plants Extravaganza. We're going to be here tonight with a lot of expertise. We're going to start it out with a movie so that you can all go to sleep, and hopefully that you can wake up and lie to me and tell me you liked it. And it's about native plants, and it's about I didn't take anything for granted because I know that native is one of those words that is difficult to understand when it comes to what it means. And so I started the story about native plants somewhere around 3.5 billion years ago. But it won't take that long to get through the movie. It's 24 minutes long. And by the way, I should mention that on our website, we have a lot of videos that have been produced by Flathead Audubon, trilogy, Birds Rock, Bird Trouble, and Bird Help, which is sort of what's wrong. And Bird Trouble is the one I'm going to be showing at that April 20th Earth Day celebration over at FECC. And I'll talk a little bit about, and it's mainly about the section about climate change and what we project is going to happen with a few species of birds under different climate change scenarios. So I'll do an hour-long presentation at 1 o'clock on that day. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of things going on that day, so you should probably come over. With that in mind, I would like to start the movie because I think it speaks for itself.
So, do you like birds? Well, here's where the bird story starts. Dirt. Soil, if you want to get fancy. But to get here, we have to tell a short story of a few billion years. Glaciers, rivers, wind, and lichens carve up rock. Millions of plants and animals die over centuries and millennia, contributing their organic chemicals to the mix. And the great cleanup crew mixes it all in the ground, making a perfect place for plants to grow. So we end up with a green planet, using carbon dioxide, water, and sunshine, photosynthesizing all of this into sugars and starches. Now keep this in mind, except for faster seed dispersal, plants don't necessarily need us, or any animals for that matter. They make their own food. We animals, being resourceful, take advantage of that. Fruits, vegetables, berries, green leafy stuff. We spend a lot of time at the salad bar. If we are herbivores, which are plant eaters, or omnivores, plant and animal eaters. But from way back in time, maybe 480 million years ago, according to biologists and archaeologists, first in line to eat the plants were the insects. Insects, especially in their caterpillar stages, ate plants and multiplied like, well, insects. Along came a spider and sat down beside her and ate insects. Some insects decided to be predatory and began to eat each other. Amphibians, then reptiles, began to eat insects and spiders and, yep, plants. Eventually, over millions of years, nature smiled on some reptiles who began to walk on two legs, and then grow their arms and fingers, and then jump farther by growing feathers for gliding. And finally, after 330 million years of nothing but plants and bugs and amphibians and reptiles, we got our first birds. An asteroid paid a visit and wiped out the giant reptiles, the dinosaurs. And the birds flew to where it was safer, and the first mammals somehow managed to escape the fate of the dinosaurs. And then another 65 million years goes by, and here we are, today, at the apex of animal development. Maybe another step up. Nope, not yet. Okay, a little better. If we were to pack geologic time into 24 hours, the first 23 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds would go by before humans and civilization even showed up. This story took a few minutes to summarize, but it took a ridiculous amount of time to actually happen. And in that ridiculous amount of time, here are the results. We now have 450,000 known species of plants in the world. We can't begin to estimate the number of individual plants in the world, but satellite estimates of just the number of trees is 3 trillion. Before humans clearing land, it was twice that many. We have removed half of them. We probably have 6 million species of insects. We have 10 quintillion, that's 19 zeros, individual insects. Now those are not understandable numbers for the human brain. They are uncountable living things that took uncountable years of the E word to get as diverse as they are now. So let's toss in at least 160,000 species of spiders, most of whom eat insects. And then probably 400 billion birds of perhaps 18,000 species eating plants and insects and spiders. That's the big picture. The big picture. 8.7 million species of plants and animals humming along for millions of years, eventually getting to a somewhat fluctuating state of equilibrium, a balance. Birds, spiders, bats, and other insect predators eat untold numbers of insects, controlling their ridiculous reproductive capacity, but not too many of them. Insects nibble on trillions of plants, but not too many of them. It's about balance. The balances in nature are not steady state, but on a constantly changing roller coaster of predator-prey populations that grow and shrink together in a dynamic balance. Nature can be messy and beautifully balanced at the same time. Now, occasionally that balance gets ambushed by the unexpected. An asteroid might crash into Mexico and wipe out giants called dinosaurs. Geologists say that was only the latest one. Our sun might decide to take a cat nap for 1 million years now and then, and we get an ice age. Luckily, it usually takes a few thousand years for it to fall asleep, and another few thousand years to wake back up. And animals move and plants can usually adapt without getting very unbalanced. Sometimes the sun has too much coffee when it wakes up, and it makes things hotter than usual. It was that way 5,000 years ago from today. But again, it was a slow warming and a later slow cooling. Another kind of unexpected ambush, for example, would be when a species of animal gets so smart they learn to use most of the things on the planet just for themselves. That could really throw things out of whack in a big hurry. An animal like that could burn so many things they could maybe change the whole climate. But it's hard to believe that an animal like that wouldn't also be smart enough to modify their own behavior and follow the rules of balance that nature has perfected over those millions of years. Well, some would. All that is the big planetary picture about big planetary balance. But there's something else you might want to know, because you don't just live on a planet. You live in a place on that planet. And that place has its own animals, its own plants that live in their own balance. Continents are different from each other with different climates and topography and ocean currents. And they each have their own plants and animals and their own balance. And on each of those continents, there are places where the weather is different or they are divided by a mountain range or a desert. And on that mountain range, the weather is different at different elevations, so the plants and animals are different as well. Or the weather might be influenced by being close to oceans or far away, or by being closer to the equator or to the North and South poles. In each of those hundreds of different places on the planet, the plants and therefore the animals are in their own balance, shaped by millions of years of adjustments, most of which are still going on. If they have been in that place for a very long time, living in balance with the other unique and old beings there, they get a special title. They get to call themselves a native. The natives are all different from each other, but over time, they have learned to fit in. They may have complicated relationships with hundreds of other natives, but they fit in. They don't change the balance. Every plant on planet Earth is a native to a certain place. The plant and the place need to live together because they have for at least thousands of years, if not millions. So all of the other living things that are native to a place have intricate relationships with the native plants. And the pathways are likely through the native insects or herbivores that eat native plants, often only native plants, and sometimes only one native plant. Here's a local Flathead Audubon specific example. Owen Sour Wine area, which Audubon manages, is a beautiful and rare, in Montana at least, river bottom conjunction of two rivers. Huge and old black cottonwoods tower over a subcanopy of huge and old chokecherry trees in the 8 feet higher upland of the old floodplain. The rivers have downcut and left the area higher and drier. In the seasonally wet abandoned river channels, cottonwood seedlings and saplings still grow. All of us bird nerds who frequent the area know that red-eyed vireos are very common there. In May and early June, the males are singing, "How are you? I am fine," songs up to 40,000 times per day. Then it gets quieter as the pairs are busy feeding perhaps 6 mouths instead of 2. The hatching of the chicks, at least in Owen Sour Wine, correlates exactly with the hatch of cottonwood beetle larvae, increasing the high protein food supply multifold. So this is one linear relationship of black cottonwoods to cottonwood beetles to red-eyed vireo chick survival, and it's one among millions whereby native plants feed native insects who feed native birds. Nowhere is there a non-native species that fits into most of these relationships. Not only do non-natives take up valuable space, but they often have negative relationship with natives. Our Owen Sour Wine Area Hall of Shame example is common buckthorn, originally introduced as a decorative, which leaves out earlier, drops leaves later, grows faster, chemically inhibits other native plants from growing nearby, toxifies the soil to all amphibians, and has berries which are cathartic, read diarrhea, to birds and can sicken them. It also supports no native insects. When you head for the nursery to buy decorative plants this spring, the first question to ask, is it native to here? If not, you might want to treat it like the bomb squad would.
When you purchase a non-native plant, you run the risk of buying something that may become the next noxious weed. And it doesn't have any ecosystem services. It doesn't promote reproduction of insects. And that's the huge difference between native plants and introduced species.
So here are some examples of how important native plants are to native insects. I think most people know that monarch butterflies eat only milkweed leaves. Gillette checker spot butterfly eats only twinberry honeysuckle, found mostly in avalanche shoots. It gets pretty specific out there. Add in birds, bay-breasted warblers eat almost exclusively spruce budworms, which only feed on native spruces and firs. People often talk about birds favoring certain types of habitats, but they skip a step. Yellow warblers like to live in willows next to the water. Not because they like the willows, but because they like to eat the insects that eat the willows. American redstarts live in alders because they like the bugs that eat alders. Tennessee warblers hang around bogs and wet fens because they eat the insects that live there. There are thousands of examples like this. Ruffed grouse eat seeds and in winter eat almost exclusively male, not female, aspen buds in the tops of trees. But in summer, mom grouse keeps chicks moving on the ground so they can eat insects and grow quickly. Even when it seems like a sapsucker sucks sap from the machine gun holes they make in birch trees, they are mostly there for the insects that eat the sweet sap. 96% of bird species raise their young on insects, even if the adults eat only seeds. Goldfinches like thistle seeds to eat, but they feed their young on insects that like thistle. Chickadees need about 6,000 insects, mostly caterpillars, to raise one clutch of chicks. These are native insects who eat native plants. In total, birds worldwide eat 400 million tons of insects each year. That's the equivalent weight of 66 great Egyptian pyramids in Giza. Yeah, mind-boggling. We humans think we have our own human communities of teachers and mechanics and bankers and carpenters and car salespeople, but we make three big mistakes. We think our community is separate from the big community of plants and animals. It's not. And we think we get to play by our own rules. We don't. We also consider ourselves native if we're born in a place. We're not. In North America, even Native Americans were really just starting to become native to this continent, starting to really fit in and live by native rules, native biological rules, after probably 20,000 years. And then we mowed down native plants and covered half of this continent with non-native crops and concrete and subdivisions, fostered the animals we considered good for us, and killed the bad for us. And we brought with us other definitely not native species. Despite thinking we were the smartest beings around, we didn't know. Millions of years of fine-tuning the balance in half of those native places down the drain. But here's the pretty good, could have done worse news in official Montana speak. We still have half of our mostly native habitats left. We can protect them, and we can restore at least some of what we messed up.
If we're going to have birds, we've got to think about it. We have to really push habitat in order to keep our birds.
So I found out about the rain garden program through the Flathead Conservation District, and I had this plot of grass in the back that wasn't very useful for anything, and it wasn't growing grass very well, and decided this would be a really cool project to include in my backyard. How a rain garden works is it will take the watershed off of roof to be filtered through our natural systems and then into our groundwater. So rather than rolling directly onto asphalt or onto concrete and collecting pollutants, which then goes into our groundwater system, once I had all of the sod out of the yard, then I amended the soil and brought in some compost and some other elements to help add a little more nutrition to my soil substrate so that things would want to grow there. I had a small grant also through the Rain Garden initiative that allowed me to go shopping at the Center for Native Plants and Whitefish, which is super fun. I sort of geek out on the plant. So every spring it's something I get to look forward to, and everything blooms at a different time. They have different colors, they bring different critters. It's really nice to see some of the stuff that we see in the woods naturally in town. Rather than bringing in invasive species that can blow from yard to yard and really sort of take over and squeeze out our natural flora and fauna, I really liked this element. And the other bonus points for having native plants is you really don't have to do anything with them. They already know how to grow here. You don't have to cultivate, you don't have to help them along, you can just kind of enjoy them. So again, less mowing, less work, more flowers and more pretty things. That was a win-win for me all around. This is a small way I can give back by helping produce better quality water that goes back into our system.
So, you want to help? Here you go. And watch the birds that eat the bugs that munch on your perfect restored habitat. Can you imagine how much we could fix if we can talk all of our 360 million neighbors into doing the same? We would be giving ourselves half a chance to hang around for another few thousand years.
So we have some expertise with us tonight. We have three folks here who are going to be angling a different kind of bug in front of us that probably eats native plants. And they're going to be talking about different parts of starting your own gardens in your own place. And first up is our local advocate. I once called her a guru and she got mad at me for that, but Kathy Ross was a board member of Flathead Audubon for many years, and she has been helping people change their yards and their gardens for years and years and years, and so has a lot of experience about what works and what doesn't work here. You're getting all the time. Yeah, join the party. With no further ado, Kathy, you want to come up and talk a little bit about your stuff.
This correctly. And are we going to turn the light off? I'm used to talking to plants, not people, so I'm going to imagine all kinds of things. So, and I have to be sure to hold the microphone in the right place. First of all, I have to make a correction on something I said in Denny's wonderful video. And thank you, Denny, for making the video. It really tells the story. So I made the statement that non-natives offer no ecosystem services, and that's fake information because all plants have some benefit to the environment. It's just that native plants that are native to certain ecoregions are more beneficial than when we move them around all over the world. So I just had to clarify that because they're all good. And actually you can use native plants and non-native plants in your garden, and it's, we'll talk about that. So, and I haven't seen all of this on the screen. So when we're talking about native plants, I've been landscaping for over 30 years in the Flathead Valley. Am I doing it right? Because we need to look at our gardens. And actually, I look at gardens now from a bird's perspective and an insect's perspective. Instead of through our eyes, what I'm going to talk about and what I'm going to suggest, imagine that all of these birds that Denny was just talking about, actually, what do they need in the garden? What do they need? Instead of from our perspective, let's look at it from their perspective. Because our gardens can be an extension of the nature around us. And our gardens should complement rather than compete with nature. So, and I believe that we can make a difference. And we've seen the loss of birds over the statistics, birds, insects, everything on the decline. But I really feel like we can make a difference in our own landscapes. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to make some suggestions to you from a bird's perspective on what we can do to keep our landscapes more available and more friendly to our birds. So first of all, I suggest leave forested and native plant communities. And that's not just forested communities, but that's riparian areas. If you have riparian areas on your property, or even prairie, remnant prairie, anything that hasn't been disturbed, because that dynamic below the ground and above the ground is so important. Those relationships have been going on for hundreds of thousands of years, and they're going to support the work you're doing on your property. They're going to keep the biodiversity there. So a good thing to do while you're doing that is to inventory your property on what you have. And this is assuming you have property. We're going to talk about small gardens too. But inventory what you have on the property. It's good to know what native plants you have when you get ready to work with your gardens. And it's good to know what non-native plants you have or what noxious weeds you have. So inventorying is a great thing to do. Then, and while you're doing that, think about collecting seed, because seed is a great thing. If on your property or your neighbor's property, actually you can't, there are many places you cannot collect seed. And can you hear me? Okay, am I doing this right? So seed is a great thing, doesn't cost anything, and it's really fun to work with native seed. And if you have a garden that's established already, you can take that seed and scatter it around in the garden that's already established and see what grows. So leave snags. And this is really important for our nesting birds, for birds in the wintertime. I just had some trees taken down. Occasionally I have to have a tree if it's leaning on my house or, and while they're in there working, I always ask them to leave the snags 20 feet tall. Or if you live near water, you can leave it tall enough that you can do an osprey nest that perhaps an osprey will nest on. But you can ask your arborist or whoever you're working with to leave snags on the property. And then check, well, already did the native seed. We talked about that. And I could have said nothing else but plant native plants and been done with it, because native plants are the #1 best producers of bird food, of caterpillars. So, and native plants can be used. Oh, and there is a, in the corner over here, you can see native plants can be used just like plants you buy at the nursery. If you want something manicured, you can cut back areas and manicure them, make them look more formal, or you can leave them wild. You can prune trees up, and things like serviceberry and chokecherry, great architectural structure if you prune them up, but you still have the native there to support the birds. Then one of the things we hear a lot about anymore is less lawn. And Doug Talame says it pretty accurately when he says, think about when you're thinking about lawn, think about your lawns as, when you're thinking less lawn, think about an area carpet for your lawn rather than, or an area rug rather than carpeting the whole house. So think less lawns. Lawns use more resources in our world than agriculture. I mean, more water, more chemicals, you name it, they use more. So, and they really don't have a lot of ecosystem services. They don't really support our birds. So if we can cut back on our lawns, it's going to help a lot. And trees and shrubs are great. If you get that down to an area carpet, and plant trees and shrubs around, that's going to be great environment for our birds. They're going to love it much more than a lawn. So, and then if you do want lawn, they're talking about, we're seeing a lot about pollinator lawns. And this is a really interesting concept where they're actually seeding things like help self-heal, which there's a little picture of it in the middle over there. And I noticed, I was at the Whitefish Library last year, in the back of the Whitefish Library, and they have a pollinator lawn. They have, in their lawn, they have self-heal growing, and they have thyme, not native, self-heal is native, but they've seeded it into their lawn, and it's great for the pollinators, and it offers more ecosystem services. So that's another idea if you want to have have lawns. And then leave leaf mulch. I don't know about you, but having been a gardener for most of my life, we always think about cleaning our gardens up in the fall. Well, guess what? That's where the insects that our birds need are they winter over in the leaf mulch and all that debris on the forest floor or in our gardens. That's where all stages of the insects winter over, is in that debris. And even our mourning cloak, the Montana state butterfly, winters over as an adult in leaf mulch, and then comes out in the early spring as an adult to breed. So leaf mulch is a great thing to leave. And I don't know, at my house, I have the juncos dig around in the soil all winter long for the insects that have wintered in there. So it's insect food for the birds even in the wintertime. And also our native solitary bees leave stems. They lay their eggs in the stems of plants that we leave in the garden. So leave those stems too. If you want to clean the garden up, at least leave a couple feet high of stems, and the solitary bees can still lay their eggs in there. Then those eggs will hatch in the springtime. Don't clean up too early in the springtime though, because we want to give them a chance to hatch. So, and then for the insects that feed our birds, celebrate the holes in leaves. We have been taught that we don't want to see holes in our leaves, but actually from a bird's perspective, that means that we have insects growing in our yard that are going to feed our birds. So, and with that, we have to start minimizing the use of herbicides and pesticides, because that is one of the main things that you walk into a garden center, you walk into a hardware store, there are dozens of different kinds of herbicides and pesticides, dozens of them, and to kill things. So no wonder we're losing insects. So, and I want to speak about neonicotinoids, or neonics, which are a systemic pesticide, and they are used, they are the most widely used pesticide in the world now. They have only been around for about 30 years, as long as I've been gardening here in Montana, actually. And they're a systemic pesticide that's used on ornamental plants, and they're taken up into the whole plant, including the pollen and the nectar. So they are affecting our insects. Definitely, if you go to a nursery, you're not going to see holes in the leaves of the plants, because too often the nurseries use these systemic pesticides in their plants. So I suggest, for me, if I'm gonna buy a plant to support to my pollinators, I want something that I know is healthy for my pollinators. So I suggest that we ask the nurseries if they use systemic pesticides in their plant material. And I have asked, and they don't like that question, I have to admit. And some of them don't really know, because they buy a lot of their plants from wholesalers. So so it's that throws me off every time. I got the 2-minute warning. Anyway, it's just a good question to ask especially if you're planting for pollinators. And also the bird conservancy groups, ABC, Audubon, Cornell Lab, everyone is doing research on neonics now and how they are affecting birds. And neonics are used as a coating on seed for big agriculture. And it is killing, and there's a lot left when they plant a gigantic field. The birds are eating those seeds they're finding, and we are losing birds to the neonicotinoids. So it's a real problem, and there's a lot of research going on about the damage that it's doing to the environment, even though supposedly it doesn't hurt us. In the long term, it definitely is going to. So ask your nurseries, that's something you can do. Ask your nurseries to, if they use neonic or systemic pesticides, that's a little easier than neonics. And also ask your nurseries to carry native plants. We have a wonderful native plant nursery, the Center for Native Plants, and they do not use chemicals. And most native plant nurseries do not use chemicals because we want the insects to eat the plants. But we need more. We're the consumer. We need to let garden centers, we need to let people know that we care about what we're buying. So ask nurseries to carry native plants and check with them and see if they know if there's systemic pesticides. So those are a few things that we can do in our own gardens. And I have lists of plants. I've been landscaping gardening here for 30 years. I have lists of plants that I suggest for gardens, along with the Talabase list. And so I guess that's all.
Thank you, Kathy. So our next guest in the extravaganza is going to be Jessie Walthers. She is the education and program person at Flathead Conservation District. And maybe some of you know about the Flathead Conservation District because you've tried to get a 310 permit to put a bridge on do something with water. It's a great organization. They do a lot of, they've given us a number of grants for educational purposes. And they have a beautiful system where we just apply. They actually sometimes are hurting for people to apply for these grants. And so the money's there. And if you have some worthwhile environmental project that has to do with the quality of the natural systems in the Flathead Valley, talk to them. Jessie.
Thank you. Thanks, Denny. Thanks everyone for letting us participate tonight too. And great job, Kathy. So I'm, as Denny mentioned, the conservation program manager at Flathead Conservation District, and I'm going to share a little bit about rain gardens. And that was, I agree, just a wonderful video, Denny. And you may have noticed in that video, Shannon, who was one of the rain garden participants. So that was a great segue to a lot of the stuff that I'll touch on as well. So if you're just briefly not familiar with Flathead Conservation District's programs or our scope, we are in charge of locally led conservation in Flathead County. So we administer stream permitting, as Denny mentioned. We have a lot of programs for education and conservation. We do a lot of projects for restoration and watershed health and stream bank stability and other things like that. And we work with a lot of partnerships. Almost everything we do is with other groups and nonprofits. If you're not familiar with conservation districts as a group, they're all over the country. They're all over the state of Montana, roughly in every county. They arose out of the Dust Bowl, if you're familiar with that time period, where there was just drought and some serious erosion issues because of drought and winds and really aggressive agricultural practices coming out of the Great Depression. And so conservation districts were one of the tools that was developed in addition to, on a national level, what was called the Soil Conservation Service, and which is now the Natural Resource Conservation Service. So that's kind of our history. As Denny mentioned, one of the main things that we administer in Montana, this isn't necessarily true all over the country as far as administering stream law, but in Montana we do that. And so anyone who lives on a stream or a river, perennial flowing stream or river, if you're going to do any work near the stream, you need to acquire what's called a 310 permit. So that's a big part of what we do at our office. We also administer landowner programs, and these are voluntary programs for Flathead County residents. And we aim to really provide resources. So we know that it usually costs more money and more time and effort to do conservation practices on your private land. So we try to provide resources and funding to do that. Conservation grants are a big part of what we do. These are a cost share program. We can provide up to $5,000 per landowner and provide things like windbreaks, weed treatments, soil and pasture improvements. So a lot of different projects, and they are an application, but we rank them every year, and depending on what the project is, we can supply some funding. We have other landowner assistance programs. These are good ways to get other native plants as well. So we have a conservation seedling program where we can help you purchase mostly native seedlings. We have a pollinator initiative where we can help you acquire pollinator seed. We have a native grass seed mix where you can buy native grasses at roughly half the price that you would normally pay for them over at CHS in Kalispell. So you just come into our office and get a form and you can buy these special grass mixes. We have the Rain Garden Initiative, a septic cost share program to encourage people to maintain their septic systems, especially if they live near water. And then partner with the city of Kalispell on Adopt a Drain. We have a lot of education programs as well. We have college scholarships for high school seniors. We have camp sponsorships. So if you know a young person who wants to go to some sort of natural resource camp, but it may be expensive for the family, we can help pay for that. We have education grants that can help teachers and other nonprofits and other groups. And then we offer a lot of classes and resources. This is just one. There is a flyer in the back for this, but the land stewardship series that we're hosting in conjunction with Mackenzie from the Extension office, who will speak next, but a really great series that's starting up at the end of March and goes for 6 weeks. So rain gardens specifically. And the major thing, if you're thinking about putting in a rain garden, is to think about stormwater. So rain gardens are really beneficial for native plants, but they have kind of a special role in that they really help filter stormwater. So if you're not familiar with stormwater, this is water from precipitation that runs over impervious surfaces and collects pollution or pollutants. Impervious surfaces, if you haven't heard that word before, it's basically just a hard surface that won't absorb water. So a road or a sidewalk or a building, rooftop. And the pollutants can be anything from fertilizer in an agricultural field or in your yard to metals and oils from the road, dirt or sediment from dirt roads or construction sites. And these all comprise what you may have heard of as non-point source pollution. So that's kind of one of our predominant sources of pollution in our Flathead Basin watershed. We don't have a lot of major discharge like some big cities might have, but we have a lot of this non-point source pollution. So this is just a little visual of what that looks like, that as water moves off of rooftops or driveways, even pet waste, motor oil, all of those types of things can eventually make their way into storm drains and then into our waterways. So rain gardens are a great beneficial way that we can all incorporate these to help mitigate the effects of stormwater. And they're basically just a depression in the ground that allows the water to run off, and then they're planted with hopefully native plants that help the roots absorb that water and it infiltrates into the ground. It can have some amount of overflow, but basically that water is going back into the groundwater and being filtered instead of just rushing on and continuing into waterways. And this is just a little visual of what that would look like near a house or a home, where you could see the water would come off the roof through the gutter and then enter into this little depression shaped area. So they filter out pollutions that may be picked up in the water, and they're a really natural and beautiful way to reduce that stormwater runoff and reduce the amount of pollutants entering the waterways. And they can be a really fun variety of shapes and designs. So I just put up a couple of different pictures. This one I really like. It's kind of like a riverine shape. This one you can see there's kind of a little gutter drain flowing into a rain garden. This is what one might look like next to a street, where you can see there's kind of a low point over on the right where the water can run into the garden, and you have that low shape. And this one I liked. It's different, sort of Zen looking, so they can be kind of, you know, whatever your aesthetic is, you could adapt to your own yard and wants. And this one I liked because it's actually in a container garden, which is kind of cool. So you could do that even in an urban place or a small area. So the design, we can talk a little bit more about the design, but basically it has these features. It's that bowl shape, kind of a little basin, and it has these zones. So it's deeper at the lowest point, and then kind of has a little as it goes uphill, and then zone C is that high point. And we do have a lot of resources. I'll talk about that. But when you're thinking about your rain garden, you want to think about it in that way, that the middle is that lowest place, and then kind of a little bit upland, and then the higher area. And then you would choose different plants based on the ones in the middle in that section A, or section 1 can tolerate a little more water, not a lot of standing water, but just a little bit more water, then a little bit drier as you work your way up the little slope, and more dry in that upper area. Just some considerations if you're interested in a rain garden of where to place them. You would always want to make sure you're at least 10 feet away from your foundation and not draining. So the way it's angled, not draining back towards your house or your foundation. You don't want to put them over a septic tank or drain field. You can put them on a gentle slope or a flat area. Any place that's going to capture the runoff from a roof or a sidewalk. You want to avoid persistently wet areas. You could put it like above a wet area that would help absorb the water rather than in that wet area itself. And of course, anywhere where you might have electrical lines or utilities or anything like that. And then, as I was mentioning, you can choose different kinds of plants for the different zones. So basically choosing plants on their moisture preferences. The center of the rain garden would be the most water tolerant plant, and then becomes drier. A variety of plants you can, and this would be likewise very beneficial for pollinators and birds. You can do a wide variety of grasses and sedges and shrubs and flowering species, and that can also help develop the root system. The season of bloom, this will create a really nice visual for you, but also really beneficial for the pollinators to have in all different seasons. Parts of the growing season have something to be utilizing. And then, you don't have, like Kathy was mentioning, you don't have to use native plants, but if you do, there's all those added benefits where they're better adapted to the local climate, soils. They usually have better root system, and they don't require a lot of fertilizer or winter protection, and they provide a lot of good habitat for our native birds and pollinators. Usually they're more drought tolerant and less maintenance. The Flathead Rain Garden Initiative itself is a partnership between the Conservation District, the City of Kalispell, the Center for Native Plants, and the Western Montana Conservation Commission. And we have a lot of resources with that program. We have educational resources, financial assistance. Shannon mentioned in the video, we have a landowner program where you can agree to put a little sign like you saw in our picture. You can put a sign in your yard and potentially get some funding to help you buy the plants. You get a gift certificate for the Center for Native Plants. And we can provide technical assistance, recommendations, or support you in ways. That's kind of always evolving depending on what resources are available. We do have a workshop on our website, or workbook, excuse me, on our website, and it can guide you through it, like helping to get to know your soil type, how fast of an infiltration rate, to kind of help you just also how to decide how large you want to make your garden. It also has plant guides. There's other good rain garden plant guides like from the Center for Native Plants, but we do have one too. This is just one page. I think it's like 12 pages of all the different zones in the rain garden and what plants are a good fit. And these are some resources for acquiring native plants if you want to use those in your rain garden. We have the pollinator initiative where you can get free pollinator seed, the seedling program, and the grass seed program that I was mentioning, the Rain Garden Initiative, which can help you buy those native plants, the Center for Native Plants and other local nurseries, Montana Native Plant Society that has excellent resources, and the Free the Seeds event that we just had that was so fun where you can get great seeds. So some benefits of rain gardens, especially when they utilize native plants, they do filter the water and they reduce the pollutants entering the waterway. They are more low maintenance, water-wise, obviously visually very beautiful and enjoyable. They support native pollinators, birds, and wildlife. They have strong, deep roots and help recharge the groundwater and improve soil health and ecology. And this, I just like the video or the visual because it shows the some of the insects utilizing the rain garden and a little frog or toad in there as well. And this Kathy mentioned this a lot, which was great, but these are just some little tips if you're using native plants in your rain garden that you want to plant a variety of native species, variety of colors, shapes, bloom times throughout the whole season. So there's something for all the pollinators throughout the entire, from early spring to the fall. Leaving that woody vegetation standing in the garden, even though it looks kind of messy, just like Kathy mentioned, that's where a lot of the pollinators are wintering over, and leaving those leaves in the beds, at least until things start to bloom naturally. A lot of our native bumblebees, the queens, winter over in the leaf litter. So it's really important to try to, I just had this argument with my mom because every year I tell her she can't rake out the garden beds. And she's like, oh, gets frustrated, but then she agrees. So she leaves them there. So yeah, and then waiting until things are starting to bloom before you start taking that stuff out of your garden. So I think that's it. And we'll wait till we're all done for questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Jessie. Last but certainly not least, we have the MSU County Extension agent. How long have you been here? What, a year or so on the job? Just over a year last week. Mackenzie Dey is a self-described natives nerd, I would say, probably, right? And she's going to talk to us about what the conservation, what the extension agent can do for you.
Perfect, you got it, Denny. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here and chat with you all. Thank you, Kathy and Jessie, for your wonderful talks, and Denny for your awesome and comical, too, at times, video. I really appreciated that. So we talked a lot about how wonderful natives are, and I could go on and on, like Denny said, I do love native species. I have an undergraduate degree in botany, and then I got a master's degree in plant science. So I'm a bona fide plant nerd. So I'm with my nerdy community tonight, with our bird nerds, our insect nerds, and plant nerds. So what a wonderful time that we can come together, congregate, and learn about something that can benefit all of us. And if you don't like the word nerd, I'm sorry, but get used to it. Just kidding. So what I wanted to focus on tonight was planting for success. Before I get into that though, I forgot, I wanted to ask too, by a raise of hands, sorry for those on Zoom, I can't see you, but who here has heard of the MSU Extension office? Okay, great. Keep your hand raised if you've used any of our services before. Okay, that's quite a few of you. Awesome. Glad to hear it. I'll talk with you guys after about your experience. But to say the least, MSU Extension is basically just that. It's an extension of the university. So all that work and all the research goes on at the university and throughout the state. And so every county has an extension office where someone like me works, where we help provide that research-based information for the public. So I teach classes, and I'm like doing that class series with Jessie and a few other organizations here in the county. I do one-on-one site visits. I answer phone calls all summer long about gardens and ag crops. And hey, there's something weird with my tree. Come take a look at it. I don't know how to describe it. So that's where I come in and I can help with all those things. So at the end, I'll kind of talk about how I can be a better resource for you guys when we're talking about planting natives in our landscapes. So something I wanted, oh, sorry, can you go back? I wanted to see a little bit more. So I love natives because I love being outside like most of us probably do. Big thing for me is, and you know, I have a biased opinion, and I think most of all of us do, but we live in one of the most stunning places in the world. We have gorgeous ragged mountains that are adorned with what are my favorite, the bottom of the ecosystem or flora. They're absolutely stunning, and like we've talked about, they add so much wonderful benefits to the ecosystem as they are our main foundation to let everything we also love, like our birds and our insects and the deer, all the other ungulates and the mammals, all survive and thrive. So when we're talking about natives tonight, I want to talk about how we can successfully incorporate those into our landscapes, which we kind of mentioned a little bit tonight, but I want to go into the nitty-gritty of it. So I think first, when talking about natives, it's really important to know what your goal is. Before you get all excited about picking the plants you want to pick, which I've totally done this myself, don't be the person that calls me and says, hey, Mackenzie, I planted these native species and they just flopped. And I go, oh, I wonder why. And I'll give you an example later on. But I want to make sure that when you are using your energy and your resources, it's going towards something positive and something that's going to thrive. So knowing your goals is super important. So for example, what do you really want from your landscape? Do you want something that's really high maintenance? Do you want something that's low maintenance? For most people, I feel like low maintenance is the way to go. That's for sure me. You might think the opposite, but I spend so much time talking to people about plants. I just want to get out there, get the weeds out, and then get the fruits of my labor from my garden be done. But also, not only can your gardens give you food, but also they give food for wildlife like we've been talking about. So what wildlife do you want to attract? And if so, who? And pollinators, if you want to support pollinators, we've heard great examples of how we can do so, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But thinking about who you want to get involved in your landscape. Something else I want to talk about too is I get a lot of people who come into my office for questions and they say, I want a no maintenance lawn, landscape, or garden. And I say, I'm sorry, that does not exist. Everything requires some maintenance. So don't think natives are no maintenance, but they are definitely a lot lower maintenance than your typical Kentucky bluegrass lawn, which I won't get into it because you don't want to see a feisty me tonight, but another thing too is I want to say is have some patience. Natives take time to really adapt to where they're living and to start thriving. For example, like wildflower meadows are kind of big right now, if anyone's heard of those. I think they're awesome, but they do take about 3 to 5 years to really get going. So give them a little tender loving care, and then they'll give it back tenfold a couple years later, just like your kids probably, right? My dog is one of those for me. Some examples though, I mean, just think too, you can have multifaceted uses for all of your natives too. Many different flowers will support multiple different pollinators. So you can kind of support two birds with one flower. Okay, so after you know your goal, it's really important to know your site. We're going to be planting everything. It's really important to note that, as we learned in the video, with evolution, plants have adapted for very specific climates and environmental conditions. So something you could do is draw a pretty simple plot or a pretty extravagant, found this on Google, I did not do this, plot and survey of where you live. And this looks so different for all of us. But it's really important to note everything that's going on with your property or just the area you're living or your community garden. So track where the sun's coming. Where's north, south, east, and west? South is going to be the sunniest, north is going to be the most shaded out. Note too where wind is coming from. Some species are much more tolerant of high winds and some not so much. And really important here is to know your soil type. So Flathead Conservation District can help you with this, but I also can help you with this too. So do you have a really rocky soil? Do you have a lot of sand where you can pour water all the way down on that sucker and you're just giving back to the groundwater, which thank you for your donation if you are. Or do you have clay where it's really heavy and it holds onto water and holds onto it for a long time? Important to know those things. Also, if you're planting near a building, it's really important to know because buildings come radiation. They'll absorb heat and they'll radiate it back off. So sometimes, especially in the southern aspect of our buildings, it'll be sometimes 10 to 20 degrees hotter than other parts of our garden because of all that heat that's coming off. So if you like corn, that's a great place to put your corn. But something to keep in mind. Also, something too is always consider a soil test. I help do soil tests at the office. I have probes that can help you collect your soil test. It helps you know what exactly you're working with, what pH your soil is, and what nutrients are already available. Because when you're putting new plants in, it's good to know what's there and what's not there. Some people say, well, just throw fertilizer, just throw compost on it. That can be very harmful if you already have enough. Even compost, yes, there is a thing as too much compost. We can talk about that too later, but I won't focus on that tonight. But just making sure that you know exactly where you're going to be putting the fun part. Yes, so now we get to the fun part. We know what our goals are, and then now we have a site selected, so now we can pick the fun stuff. Like we said, plants have evolved for very specific conditions, and it's really hard for them to thrive when they've lived in a climate for millions of years. So plant for success. So think of that specific site. So you can say, okay, my end goal is to bring pollinators and my soil type is really sandy. So what are species that can fit that criteria? Also good to think with your site is what species prefer what certain conditions. For example, do they prefer full sun, partial shade, partial sun, or full shade? What soil type do they prefer? Do they like a moist or dry condition? Just thinking their native habitat, where would they be? Would they be by a riverbed? Do you have a riverbed near you? Or do they love full sun? And are you in a high elevation forested area? So just different things to consider. You can totally baby plants though and help them definitely move along for sure. But most plants really love their specific conditions. 2 examples here. So the top we have blanket flower. We've seen that in a few of our slides already. Wonderful, beautiful, later blooming flower that helps pollinators later on in the season. It is a full sun, rocky, loving flower. As opposed to the bottom where we have yellow columbine, where it prefers partial sun to full shade. And it loves moist conditions with a well-draining soil. So these are very 2 different flowers that can thrive in very different areas. But the cool thing is you get to decide which ones you want to bring in and which ones fit your area, and it can be very unique to where you live. So with those 3 things, I want to talk about a little bit too on Sorry, I'm not very obvious with my signs. I just want to talk about how I can help you with all of that. That was a pretty quick rendition of what we can do to help plant natives and make sure they succeed. But now, how can I help you succeed with your plants succeeding? Good question. Thank you for asking. So huge thing is I can help recommend species too. I have good friends at the Center for Native Plants, and there are so many wonderful resources that are already here that can help you know exactly what will work well in landscape here in northwestern Montana. And I can help recommend those resources. And I have loads of wonderful research at my fingertips. With the university, I have access to a lot of great research, and there are a lot of interesting research projects going on right now too, which is exciting. We'll get some new stuff here coming out soon. But when I don't know an answer to a question, I have a whole list of people who I know can answer that question. We have tons of different specialists on campus that have very niche research topics. One of my good friends, her name is Abby Saeed. She is our horticultural specialist, but she focuses on pollinator lawns. So she does quite a bit of research with pollinator habitat and how to increase that habitat in urban areas, like here in Kalispell. So I have access to lots of different people that I can help tap into their knowledge so we can get you the answers you need. Another big thing too is I love soil health and fertility. Healthy soil is going to give you healthy, happy plants. Healthy plants give you happy, healthy birds and bees and all the other wonderful wildlife that we love here in northwestern Montana. So really great opportunities here. We have probes that you can get and borrow from our office. And I have a whole guide on how to help you know your soil texture, what to do with your specific soil type, specific gardening needs that your soil type might need or require. So we have a wealth of knowledge that can help you understand your soil type a little better. And spring's coming on, that's a really good time to start testing your soil. If you garden too, great way to know what your vegetables are going to be eating. So we have a lot of great stuff here. But at the end of the day, I'm just a resource here to help anyone here in the community. I get tons of different questions and I love helping people, especially when they're about natives. Ornamentals aren't too shabby. As long as you're excited to get outside, that's all I care about, but I have a special place for natives in my heart. So I'm always happy to help answer any of your questions. So with that, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Kathy, come on. Can we have the lights back on? Somewhere? So it's time, that was a lot in a very short amount of time, right? Am I right? A lot, yeah, everybody overstimulated, but I know there must be questions out there. So we're all up here ready, the firing squad is out there and we're all standing here getting ready for questions. So who's got the first one? And for who? Yes. What?
Mackenzie.
Okie dokie.
The Croston office.
No, and I realized that's something I should have put in my slides. I apologize. So we are just south of the courthouse on Main Street. We're in that like white and brick building next to all the county buildings on the west side of Main Street.
Okay.
If you want the address and more specifics, totally can get that to you. But that's us. We're separate from the Crescent Research Center, but we work closely. I work closely with them doing classes and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. 11, yeah.
I forgot to mention that too, even though no one asked. But if you're not sure where the conservation district, we're like right behind Joanne Fabric and the Franz Bakery outlet, you know, where in Evergreen. So we're in a little building with the NRCS is on one side and the conservation district is on the other.
And they have an awesome native garden. So go check it out.
Yeah, they have a demonstration, rain garden right there. And I wish they had a trailer right there too, but that's just another story. Okay. Anyway, I also want to mention that we're all talking about lawns up here, bluegrass lawns. And I read a statistic the other day that said that 65,000 square miles of lawn in the United States of America. So if everybody could just cut it in half, we could make a big impact.
Does anybody know the pollinator lawn at the Whitefish
No,
Library?
No. And if it's the right kind, if it's the right height of plants, you don't even have to mow it.
The
That's-
thing is, you can mow them.
You can mow those plants, yeah, right. Other questions? Yes,
About the legality of getting rid of your grass.
the legality of getting rid of your grass. I'm not a cop, but who's a cop up here? So how do you mean that?
Well, what happens is, if you're somebody in home. HOA, yeah.
Oh, HOAs, okay.
They don't seem to like the same things.
Yeah, that's, as far as I know, most of the municipalities, there's no prohibition on that. Sometimes like in Kalispell, you may have to check with that, like that little strip between the road and the sidewalk, which is the little, yeah, you may have to check if there are requirements for that. But Abby Saeed, I just saw her give a presentation about, and she recommended if you live in an HOA to do like, have your lawn in the front and then put like all this fun pollinator stuff in the back that people might think looks messy or something like that. So that was her. Usually you have to check with your HOA, but that was a good recommendation, I thought. And it's a good, you could have your HOA like host a night with us and educate them about all the benefits, you know, and maybe that'll maybe shift.
You know, I'm gonna add to that because in Missoula, there are some fabulous places right in the middle of town that have native plants in the front yard and the backyard. And one of the main things is if you're doing, if you want to do native and you're doing it in, you can do it in subtler ways and add intention. Make sure that you have a path through your native garden, something that shows people that it's cared for and not just a weed patch, which they may mistake it for sometimes, but use intention.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent to business in the front, party in the back if you're an HOA with your garden.
I'm a big proponent of messy is healthy. But we'll get back to you. We'll take a new person.
Do any of you guys come out and do an evaluation? I'm gonna get rid of a 1/4 acre lawn. I want to do this program. So would somebody come out and say, yeah, this would be good idea here?
Yeah, I could totally help you with that. Yeah, give me a call. Go back to, oh, hey, you were watching, good. Can you help with that?
Yeah, we do that for the rain garden program. We can also do it with the conservation grants. So if you wanted to apply for a grant for some of that work, like buying some of the native plants or something like that, then we do come out and do a site. You would submit your proposal, but then we come out and can visit with you for that and throughout the process as well.
Thank you very much.
Well, that kind of answers the question because I'm a landscaper. And we're running into real situations in this town. And so we get to our seniority, the people we have with our water tank situation. We are just not able to irrigate a lot of these properties, you know. So it kind of helps me to know that I can have some resources to go to in that situation.
Way in the back, Linda.
So least likely all boring mobility.
Can you repeat the question, Denny?
Yeah, I can't repeat the question because I didn't quite get it. You have to speak up a little bit, Linda.
She,
did you hear?
yeah.
Yeah, so just asking about deer tolerant like landscaping plants and just plants in general because she can't fence. So there's a whole mock guide actually. So mock guides are basically just like fact sheets, quick fact sheets for anyone to have access to. They're free online and I have hundreds printed in my office. So there's a whole mock guide on deer resistant landscaping plants that can be used. I will say, I was just about to say, when times are tough, even those don't prevail. But they definitely look less appetizing than, you know, other species. I will say they just don't love, like anything in the mint family is a great go-to. They still eat those for you guys too. But do they eat them first? Aren't they like kind of the last to go? You have them a little longer. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's a tough one. We got a lot of hungry deer here, so thanks for adding to the record.
We at Owen Sauerwein, we did construct about 3 years or 4 years ago now, a deer exclosure to try to keep them. We were comparing inside the exclosure to outside. And we've got quite a difference in the height of the cottonwood seed trees on the inside and the outside. So they're everywhere. You don't eat knapweed, dang it, which is too bad. Also wanted to mention that there's a new guide out, which is online. I don't think there's hard copy of it, but it's an online guide. This is called Living in the Flathead, and it's a multi-page thing, largely for people who already are here and want new information about living here. And that includes everything from getting along with wildlife to rain gardens to whatever. Audubon's got a section in there on getting along with birds. And so this guide was put out by the Flathead Lakers just recently, and it's beautiful because all the new people that are coming into we're going to steer them in this direction and say, hey, listen, if you want to fit in here, really, this is the way to do it.
If you, like to that earlier question, if you have new neighbors or something like that, there's a stack of these in the back. You're welcome to take one, or, you know, maybe it could just be a great place to direct people and say, here's a really good place to start getting informed. And there's fire preparedness, living with wildlife, you know, how to prevent wildlife conflicts. And then all of the topics are very similar to the class, that 6-week class that we're starting at the end of March. So, you know, if you are interested in that or think you have a new neighbor that might really benefit from that, feel free to pass along that flyer too. They're in the back.
Any other questions? Yes.
So if you're starting a rain garden, do you have any suggestions about what you can do about quackgrass? It seems to be such a problem.
Here we go. That sounds so much like an extension agent kind of question.
You should go first, Jessie. Yeah. Quackgrass is really hard. I mean, the things that I've heard are, you know, trying to use less herbicide, like we were talking about, but, you know, to really try to dig deeply to try to get below the root system. So if you really try to dig it out pretty deep and then add in, you know, new soil, compost, or, you know, dig a larger area than what your garden is going to be, and, you know, have mulch and things on the top and weed fabric, and really try to kill that grass off. Same with the pollinator gardens, you know, trying to start a pollinator garden from seed, you really have to work on killing that grass or weed surface before putting the pollinator plants or seeds in, because they just won't outcompete. So you can use herbicide. Yep, you could use weed barrier, cardboard, things like that. a lot of mulch. You just really have to work and work and work at it and keep on it because the grass will keep encroaching. So.
Speaking of weed barrier, I've had them come right straight through double layers. So, but digging down, the only thing that's been successful in our place is really digging down deep, and getting all of those suckers that go from plant to plant to pop them up. You have to just physically know them.
Say one other thing that I find helpful, I've done this before when I put in like a wildflower meadow in a previous home I lived at, is you can just smother them. So for a whole growing season, it looks kind of unsightly, but I literally just put down some black towels. I put it down in the area and it just restricted so much of that the sun, so they couldn't photosynthesize. And they really were so weak that I then used a really light herbicide just right before the end of the winter, before fall, before winter came, just to really kill it. And then the next year it was fine. But you don't even need to use the herbicide. I just really wanted to make sure I didn't have any issues, but that was something to kind of help. So then when you do it's Monday, it's late. When you dig really low, those, all the grass, all the rhizomes, are so weak they can't really catch up.
Old rugs were great. I have a friend that used old rugs.
Old rugs, yeah. Our entire garden, Mary Jo will attest to this, our entire garden is covered with sample carpet rugs from that they don't make anymore, that they're just getting rid of, and it works just wonderfully for mulch, for preventing a lot of things. Not as bad as garden. So we're gonna if you have further questions, just hang out, because I think everybody's willing to hang out for a little while here and talk to everybody here. We want to let everybody else who doesn't have questions go home. Yes.
About cultivars of native plants. Just want to touch on this briefly. There are hundreds of nativars out there, which are cultivars of native plants. And that's usually, if you go to a nursery and ask for native plants, most of them are going to be cultivars of the native, only they sell them as native. So it's something to watch for when you're shopping at a garden center. They are different. Most of them are cloned. So their genetic diversity, they lose their genetic diversity. The same plants, when they're cloned, the same plants that are grown here, like a magic carpet spirea, is the same plant that somebody's using on the other side of the country. So nativars are something to watch out for.
That's the scariest news I've heard in a long time.
I learned so much tonight. I hope you all did too. So thank you, everybody, for coming to speak tonight. It was a great program. Really enjoyed it.